No, edit.
Oh, here. I found it.
Hello,
I found
hello.
it.
We are live. Hello, hello. Please do let us know. Can you see us live? We are in the Ask Your Mentor Anything with Paula Arturo this Friday. Can you please confirm that you can watch us and hear us well? We are both live in the Facebook Mentoring for Translators group, starting out as translator group, and my YouTube channel and my Facebook page public. Paula?
Yes. Carolina says she can see us too.
We are not live yet?
Oh, she says yes. Carolina says yes.
Okay.
It's working.
I thought it was the wrong group. Yes, Caroline says yes because she's on YouTube. Hello, perfectly fine, says hello. So welcome. This is the weekly session, Ask Your Mentor Anything in the Mentoring for Translators group. And we are live at the same time on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome, 1 week again. Hello, Zilieta. Please do let me know if you can hear us and watch us well in the Mentoring for Translators group, because I have a thing with the setting for this specific group. So if you are watching us from the Mentoring for Translators group, please do let me know in the comments. I see that people are coming. So Paula, thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you.
Live session. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Thank you all for being here with us. You're live, perfectly fine. Yes, I'm pretty sure that we are live. I'm not sure if we are live in the Mentoring for Translators group or the public page. Please do let me confirm. I'm waiting. Okay, great. Welcome all. This is Paula Arturo from Argentina, and this is a great honor for me having her here. And because a lot of you have been asking me to host such an event about the specific topic that we're going to discuss today. So let's start by, would you like to introduce a bit yourself for those that might not know you already or they watch us for the first time?
Okay. So hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much, Virginia, for having me, for inviting me. It's sweet that she says she's honored to have me. I'm equally honored to be here. I really appreciate Virginia's work. Virginia and I met a while ago when I was collaborating on a different project with someone, and we had this interview, and she came up with this mentoring idea, or she mentioned the mentoring idea, and I thought, I like her. I like how her mind works. And the reason for that is because I personally am a person who prefers mentoring to other formats when it comes to training future professionals. A, because I'm a giant nerd, and B, because I love the kind of bond and relationship that comes out of mentorships. I think it's very valuable. So I just want to start by saying thank you to Virginia, and great job. I love it. So I'm going to introduce myself because I know that's what she asked me to do, and I totally digressed. So I'm Paula Arturo.
Yeah, I always mention the way that we met. I always mention the way that I've met the people that I invite here. So thank you so much for reminding me the way that we met. I really would like to add that since then you have been supporting me so much. So really appreciate that. By whenever someone asks for mentoring, you mention the group, for example, or me. So thank you so much for all this support all these years. And I think like we met 2018 at least. Like in a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, it might have been 18, 17, around then. Yeah.
Okay, so please continue. I interrupted you.
It's okay. All right, so about me. My name's Paula Arturo. We said that like 3 times already. I'm what you would call a lawyer linguist, which I think is a very fancy way of saying that I'm a translator with a law degree who specializes in legal translation. But the added value with legal linguistics is that we do a lot of the work that I do is for international organizations like the United Nations or like the International Bar Association. And part of my work is also to explain local law in terms that internationalists can understand when they're reviewing certain documents. So a lot of times, well, one of just to give you an example, every 4 years, all United Nations member states are reviewed by the Human Rights Council. It's called the Universal Periodic Review. It happens every 4 years for every individual country. So countries will submit reports, like an official state report, on the human rights situation in that country. And then nonprofit and grassroots organizations that reach a certain level, that have a certain status, will provide shadow reports where they will challenge and question what the government is saying, or they'll provide additional information for that. So that's one of the things that lawyer linguists do. And when we do that, when we translate those documents, a lot of times we'll be asked to weigh in on domestic law or some of the terminology, how it reads differently in domestic law versus how it reads at the international human rights level or in the eyes of international law. So it's legal translation with added value. That's how I look at legal linguistics.
I see a lot of value, not just added value. I didn't know so many details, so thank you so much for sharing us this. Do you have to be like a lawyer for the state in order to do this job, or any lawyer with linguistic background can like apply as, for example, I see such positions open for the EU, the European Union, for example, every year for lawyers, or for linguistics with a legal background, or lawyers with linguistic background. Is something similar? Or?
Okay, so for what I do is I work independently. I am sometimes hired by the state directly to translate some of those official documents for the state. Sometimes I am on the other side. So I work for 4 different states in Latin America, or just for the process for 4 different states. I'm still independent. I don't work for them in the sense that I'm not employed officially by any of them. I'm an independent service provider. I'm a freelancer. I just provide my service, and I do pick sides, right? So if I'm working for the government, then I'm not going to also translate any of the reports for any of the organizations that are challenging it, at least not in that period, just for ethical reasons, because I have access to too much information at that point, but not because I'm not required to. In my case, personally, that's how I work. In a lot of countries, you do have to apply for the state directly to be able to translate some of these documents. And of course, when you're within the international structure, if you're working for the United Nations directly, or you're working for the EU, you're going to have to apply. So I work for a lot of United Nations programs where they do contract me as an independent contractor. And for that, I had to take a test and apply and get approved to be a contractor for it in those particular UN programs.
Okay, I know a lot of linguists and translators that it's their dream to work for the United Nations. So it's very important for them to hear how you got started with them. So it's very interesting. And you mentioned that you are not required not to work for ethical reasons with one side or the other. So you do not sign any confidentiality or NDA before.
No, yes, I do. I do. I always work with the contract. And this is a piece of advice number 1 from Paula. Always work with the contract, no matter what you're doing. So yes, I do work with contracts. Of course, I sign contracts with every single one of my clients. And again, I do want to clarify, I'm not employed by them. So it's one thing to be a United Nations translator and to be employed by the United Nations. And it's a different thing when you're an independent contractor and you're signed on for particular assignments. So it's a completely different structure. Both will still require a test. They're always going to test you no matter what. So, but personally, because of the nature of some of the things that I translate, I prefer to pick sides. And I prefer not to be in a situation where I could potentially have any kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, conflict of interest with the information that I'm handling.
Okay, it makes sense. It makes sense. So always with a contract. And do you mean a contract like you should have a contract, or the other party should provide you with a contract?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So it depends on who you work for, right? When you're working with certain agencies, a lot of times the agency is going to be providing a contract for you. That's called an adhesion contract. You take it or leave it kind of situation. that is not always negotiable, and it's one kind of freelance structure that's very common in the translation world. Even if you work mostly for agencies, I would recommend you still have your own terms and conditions of service, and at least try to just put it out there. Just send it to, even if it's an agency, sometimes smaller agencies are willing to do dual contracts. So you sign theirs, they sign yours. Sometimes boutique agencies don't have contracts at all, so they're relieved when the translator provides the contract for them. And of course, if you're working with direct clients, you want to have your own terms and conditions and make sure, and it's coverage for both of you, right? It's a guarantee for them and it's coverage for you.
Right. Is this a service that you provide to other translators? You help other translators to compile such documents as a paid service of yours?
I do when I work with translators that are in my jurisdictions. So I'm a licensed attorney in Argentina. I do international contracts because I am an internationalist, so I can do international contracts. What I don't do, of course, is the part where you localize it specifically to a jurisdiction outside of my jurisdiction. So if you're in Germany, for example, I can draft the template for you, and then you would need to have a German lawyer just do the finishing touches and make that consistent with your local law in Germany or Spain or wherever else.
So that's very interesting. Thank you so much. Before entering our topic, I'm usually asking how did you start out? The most common questions of our mentees, which is like, how did you start out as a translator, okay, the translator part of your career, and how did you find your first client?
Okay, that's a good one. So I fell into translation by accident 20 years ago. I was working at a company and I was bilingual, and my boss kept asking me to translate stuff, and I did because I was clueless, and so I just was happily doing this service on weekends for my boss. And it was like I had no idea, and then I just happened to mention it one day to a group of friends, and one of my friends said, "But hey, translation's like an actual profession. Like they pay people to do this, and you have to know stuff to be a translator." And so I said, "Oh, really? Wow, who would have thought?" And I started looking into it and doing my research, and fast forward 20 years, and 20 years later, I've been a translator for 20 years.
That's lovely. And your first client, so it was your employer, is that correct?
Well, not really, because they weren't paying me. So I kind of think that they accidentally sort of just pushed me in the direction of translation. My first real client was actually, so when I found out that translation was an actual thing, I went and signed up for a translation course. And so I was taking my course, and one of my teachers started just sending me translations to do, and I started doing that on the side. So I would like work at my job, and then on weekends and after work I would translate for this teacher of mine. So I think of my teacher as my first client. I later found out my teacher was paying me very, very far below market value, which it took a while for me to figure that out. Not too long, fortunately. But again, that was, I guess, the first actual paid job that I had as a translator was through this teacher.
Great. And the second most common question is like, if you remember the moment that you did scale up as a translator or a business owner, if you, like, I know that you have a business, but you're working as a freelancer, you said. So do you remember any moment that it was the first time that you doubled or tripled your rate, for example, or that you got into a contract or a collaboration that made you like feel free from the income side? For example, they give you like a freedom or something, like you can name it.
Yeah, I do, and I'm gonna. For me, it was a progression. There wasn't one particular moment. It's not like, I had the one eureka client. But what did happen was when I started working for this professor of mine, Eventually I started also getting other freelance clients. I started getting more and more freelance work. And, you know, she recommended me to other people. It started out being like a word of mouth kind of thing. And again, this was not very well paid work. And I do want to clarify that. I thought from now on, call me money bags. I was convinced that they were paying me really well at first. I was very happy because I made so much more as a freelance translator than what I was making with my day job. Right. So when I was able to, and that's really, that was stage one for me. So stage one was to be able to quit my day job and work as a freelance translator full time. That was like part one. And then there was a second phase, I would say, in my career. And that's when things really kicked off, was when I decided to go to law school. So I'm not a lawyer turned translator. I'm a translator turned lawyer. I decided to go to law school because I wanted to be the best legal translator out there. I'm kind of one of those.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm one of those people that do those kinds of things.
Well, I know one more, but I find it very difficult to go and study law. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a decision. At one point, I realized I love the law. It was something that I always kind of wanted to do, but it wasn't something that I was able to do. There's like a sad personal story there in the middle. So like I wanted to be a lawyer, but I had to work instead to help out my mom and all this other stuff that happened. And so one day I realized, okay, right now I have enough money. I don't have kids. I'm not married. I don't have time, but I can make the time, or I'm young enough that I can go days and days without sleeping. And I did. I signed up for law school, which meant a lot of sacrifice because I was still working full time as a freelance translator and going to law school at the same time and supporting my little apartment in the city. And, you know, it was very challenging. It was, and law school, by the way, in Argentina is 5.5 years. So it was like 5.5 years of just waking up every day at 5 a.m. I would, from 5 to 6 a.m., send out marketing emails, like send out my resume to agencies and stuff. Then I would go to school in the morning, come back, translate, study at night. It was insane. But law school started phase two, which is in answer to your question, Virginia. When I started law school, again, I'm a very particular person. I was very careful to have very high grades. So I had grades, and I made sure everybody knew in law school that I was a full-time translator. So everyone, all of my professors, all of my classmates some of them were already starting internships at law firms. Everyone sort of started helping me out with this word of mouth kind of thing. And everyone who needed a translation would, oh, hey, I know a translator, Paula. She goes to law school with me. Yeah.
So you were lucky somehow, yeah. But your first degree was beside translation.
So first I went and I studied all the translation related stuff. There was a time in the middle there where I went to college. I'm half American, so I went back to the States for college. Then I came back to Argentina. I mean, there's like a lot of stuff there in the middle. 20 years is a long time. And then I did 2 degrees in Argentina in translation, and then I did law school.
Wow, so interesting story. Thank you so much for sharing this. I really love those stories that are very different from all the others, what they've done. So I assume like your most efficient client acquisition strategy is word of mouth.
It was in that phase 2. Phase 2 was word of mouth. And then after law school, I became very aggressive about getting clients. And when I mean aggressive, I mean that in a positive way. I mean, like, I became very active, and just really, I set a goal for myself. There was a time when I said, okay, this is how much money I want to make. What do I have to do to make that amount of money? And I started going after it, really following the money and following the clients that I wanted to get. It was kind of like a mindset thing. I hate that word, mindset, but it was a little bit like a mindset thing. Like I said, okay, this is where I want to be. Like, whose doorbell do I have to ring? What doors do I have to knock? Who do I have to bother to get that? And I started actively going after clients. And by then I was living full-time in Argentina. And so I was also, I had started a part-time teacher's assistant position at a university. And so they were bringing in a lot of scholars from other countries. fortunately, this was a university that had a very good budget. So they would bring in people from the United States, from Europe, and they were just bringing all these big names. And I made it a point to be at every single one of their presentations and to just participate somehow, ask a question, somehow engage, somehow get noticed, and find a way to just meet that person directly and give them my card without sounding sleazy in the process. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this. I assume that starting out translators, they're going to find very helpful, because even if we hate the word mindset, myself, I don't like to talk a lot about this. From my experience, because I've been providing mentoring professionally since 2016, like the 5th year now, most of translators, when they start out, this is the main problem they have, is the mindset. It is the setting goals, because you had a goal. Having a specific goal and setting the actions to go after those goals, I think is the secret, half of the secret to achieve everything in your life, not only your income or your professional freedom or whatever you want. I think setting the clear goals that you had exactly in your mind, what you would like to achieve, like in terms of income, for example. And you said, like, for those that they have been watching, and they will be able to watch the recording as well, to pay attention to your words. You said, I knew what I wanted, and who to go after, how to do it, what to ask. So you use the words that someone has to have very clear in their mind in order to set up their client acquisition strategy. So whatever you want to go after clients, this is what I teach always. You have to have a clear goal, and then to know your target market, you knew who to go after, the doors that you have to knock, as you said, and what to do, what to tell them. Like you said, you mentioned already business cards that you had over them, or I assume like you send direct emails then. So thank you so much for sharing. This is very helpful, and for those especially that they're in a position that they want to find clients, because this is the most common question, how to find clients. The second most common question is how to set up an income, a stable income and a stable workflow. So thank you so much. That was very, very useful. And I know before entering the talk that you are doing something about mentoring, or yourself, you have translating lawyers.
Yeah, okay, so Translating Lawyers is my business. I would say it's my what do they call it in modern terms, my brand, I think. so I'm kind of old school, you guys. You're gonna find that I'm online a lot, but I'm not like one of these online savvy kind of people, which I'm not criticizing. I love that there are people like that. It's just not me. I'm kind of an old school type, so I don't really know the names of things. I don't really follow trends as much. Which I think is the advantage of being over 40. Is you're at that point where you did it when you did it long enough ago that you don't need to learn this stuff now.
I don't agree. I disagree, but it's your opinion.
All right, so back to the point. Translating Lawyers is my brand, and I do my business mostly through Translating Lawyers. And then I have a second side business that I started last year, which is called Translating Lawyers Academy, where what I teach is legal translation proper. So it's not like a how to do business kind of endeavor, because I think there's a lot of that, and it's very good quality stuff like what Virginia offers and what many other people are offering at the moment. And I think that that's covered, and it's covered well, but there is a lack of quality training in legal translation. And I've found throughout my career as a translator these past 20 years, a lot has happened. One of the positions that I held while it lasted, while there was a budget for it, I directed a translation program between an American Ivy League university and a university here in Buenos Aires, where we would have legal text translated into Spanish to use at an academic level in Argentina. And then I also had a position while the budget lasted for the Supreme Court of Argentina, where we were translating documents for the justices back and forth. And what I found in both of those positions, and in that case, I was the buyer, as a translation buyer, was that having a high price did not necessarily mean that we were going to receive high quality translations. which is very different from other professions. In the legal profession, the higher your price, the more, you can never guarantee results, of course, but the better that lawyer is if you look at their stats, right? When you have a lawyer that's priced at a certain level, you go and you look at their records, you look at how many cases they've litigated, how many cases they've won versus how many they've lost. Chances are there's some kind of connection between the results that that person can reasonably obtain and how much they're charging you per hour. In translation, that's not always the case. And that's very different from other professions. So we had a very nice budget. It was a very generous budget while we had it. And we thought we were going to get really great stuff at this price. And what we ended up getting were things that were not at par with other languages or what you would expect for that price range. And that to me means people need, especially legal translators who can't do this crazy thing that I did and say, oh, I'm gonna sign up to law school to be a really good legal translator. If you can't do that, you need something else. You need some kind of alternative way of acquiring that background knowledge that you need to be able to provide these high quality translations. And that's sort of the market segment that I'm trying to cover right now.
Wow, that's very interesting. And I see some comments here about you, very nice comments that they really liked your story. And to be honest, I really agree with you because I hear that from my mentees, how to become legal translator. So this is a great to start with our topic today. But I would like you to say a few words maybe later at the end about the course. You gave a webinar yesterday.
Yeah, I gave a free webinar, and this is something that I'm going to be doing once a month. I'm very big on giving back to the community. I mentioned earlier I had a sad story, and I say it like that because, you know, it sort of like brings it down. But you know, I've had a lot of struggles in my personal life to get to where I am and to be able to achieve my dreams. Things didn't come easy. You know, I didn't have parents that could just put me through a fancy law school. I had to work my butt off. I had to get scholarships. I had to pay for it myself. I've had to make a lot of sacrifices in my life. And but at the same time, I think translation as a profession and my translation community has been very generous to me. And I've had wonderful people along the way that have showed me the ropes, that have helped me out, that have, you know, referred me to clients and trained me and taught me how to be a better translator. So part of my giving back to the community is to start doing these monthly free webinars on translation proper. So it's, you know, how do we solve translation problems?
It's so interesting. It's very touching, your story, like I feel it. So thank you so much for sharing it. And it was great, the webinar I had also a masterclass yesterday. That's why I'm so tired. Like I had so much preparation, but we can say that in the end. So do you have to be a lawyer or to be a good legal translator? This is the most common question. What is your opinion on that?
Okay, so my opinion is controversial. A lot of times, and it's controversial because I market translating lawyers as translations for lawyers by lawyers, meaning I don't work with non-lawyers. No one who does any translation for me on my team is not a lawyer. But that's not because I don't think you can be a good legal translator if you're not a lawyer. That's just because for the particular, I don't outsource, I'm not an agency. And for the particular things that I can need help with and that I will reach out to someone else for, I do need the legal background more than the linguistic background. So I don't want to send the wrong message. Like if you look up my webpage, you're gonna be like, wait, she just said you don't need to be a lawyer, but then, well, so I know it looks like there's a contradiction, but there really isn't. I think you can be an excellent legal translator and not necessarily be a lawyer. But what you are going to lack if you are a legal translator is that background knowledge of the law. And that background knowledge of the law can sometimes come back to haunt you when you're working with very, very difficult terminology, sometimes when you're working, or when the more technical the translation is, the more background knowledge you're going to need. And the more you're going to have to understand how legal systems are different across the world. So I always give this example, and if someone's listening to me now and you came to my webinar the other day, then you've heard me say this. There's a difference between legal translation and all other areas of translation. And the best way to look at it is if you think of medical translation, which I think is very hard, and I have a lot of respect for medical translators. When you're doing a medical translation, I'm sorry, you guys, there's a bug. When you're doing a medical translation, you're working with a subject or an object of translation, depending on how you look at it, that never changes. So you can be doing like a neurosurgery and be translating a whole description of a very complex procedure, and you're going to need to know a lot of complex language, and you're going to be able to understand that procedure. But the brain is a brain in every language, right? It's always a brain. Like if I say brain or in English, or I say cerebro in Spanish, I'm always talking about the same thing. A brain is just a brain. A scalpel is just a scalpel. Once you understand the procedure, then you can translate. You have the vocabulary, you have that reading comprehension, you have the subject matter knowledge, you're all set. With legal translation, an injunction is not just an injunction. Delegation is not just delegation. Congress is not just Congress. Congress is going to mean different things, and it's going to have different powers in different countries. And an injunction may or may not exist in different jurisdictions. And the word delegation in English can mean one thing in the United States, and it can mean something else in England, and it can mean something totally different in Australia within those legal systems, even within the same language. So you have that added complexity in legal translation of not just knowing both languages, but knowing both your target and your source legal system, and the different levels of equivalence, of legal equivalence between the terminology in those two systems. So it's an added layer of complexity that you can only overcome with subject matter knowledge.
Okay, I totally agree with you. Being a translator like for 13 years now, and being legal translator, I studied legal translation in my studies. I had 5 years studies in translation, and one of the fields that I studied was legal, among others. So we had some legislation about the Greek legislation, the European Union legislation here in Greece. But I don't want to make people and the translators, they start out to be afraid of this sector, or to have the feeling that they have to have a second degree. Ideally, yes. Ideally, not only for the legal translation, like a mechanics, someone that has a degree in mechanics and then turns into translator because they have some studies in translation, because we've seen that example commonly. Okay, they have a level, like they're a step ahead from all the other translators that they want to translate mechanics, because they understand the sector from inside, because they have studied and they have been mechanics, for example. So yes, I do agree that they're like a step ahead from all the other translators, because they have already the niche, if you can say that. But I wouldn't like starting out translators to be afraid, or to think that this is a necessity to have a second degree in order to gain this specialization. I think Paula agrees, because already mentioned that this is not how we say. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm definitely not trying to say you need that second degree. What I am saying, and also I do want to clarify this. Also, there's a difference between having respect for something and being afraid of something, right? Like having respect for the law and understanding that you need to go after really go after the subject matter knowledge is a positive thing, because it's going to make you go and look and learn. Being afraid is something different, because being afraid can stop you from going after that goal. And you shouldn't be stopped from trying to achieve that. What you need to do is have a perspective of, okay, this is serious stuff. When we're translating legal documents, there's a lot at stake, right? There's people's freedom at stake. There's maybe somebody's immigration status at stake. Maybe which one of the two parents are going to raise a child. These are very, very important things. If you're doing legal translations in the business world, it could be millions of dollars that are at stake. But that's no reason to be afraid of it. It's just a reason to take it seriously, to stop, think about what you do, to do your research, and to do your job well, and to motivate yourself to be really, really good at what you do.
Yeah, and I ask that, and I use the words that my mentees use when they come to me. So they say, I'm studying legal translation, but I'm going into marketing because I don't think like I have the background. I should be a lawyer in order to like go after legal translation. I'm opposite to that because I've been 13 years as a legal translator in the business, and I get so good feedback from my clients, even they are lawyers most of the time. So they tell me I couldn't have translated as good as you did the text. So even if I'm not a lawyer, I get so good comments and so good feedback from them that they can say, I couldn't have translated as good as you did, because that's not their business. Okay? They understand the law, but sometimes they cannot translate exactly because they might have not the good knowledge of the source text, for example, in order to understand and then translate it. So another solution could be you to collaborate and have someone to review your text with a legal background. So I always have lawyers to check the text and tell me if there is something that they see contradictory in the text, like something has a conflict or something that they did not understand or something that does not apply to the Greek law, for example. And this is a great way that you can start if you do not feel like you have the legal background. That's my 2 cents, my piece of advice here. You could collaborate with a legal translator in order to review your texts, at least at the beginning or whenever, at least you feel confident enough.
Yeah, so one thing that you can do is, like Virginia said, you can collaborate with lawyers. And the other thing is, as a translator, you have what lawyers don't have. You have that linguistic training, right? So you are, if you're a good translator, and you really put your heart and soul into your translation, chances are you're a good writer, right? Because you don't excel in translation if you're not an excellent writer. So if you're excelling in translation, chances are you're an excellent writer. So you have that thing that lawyers don't have. Lawyers know the law, but we don't know much about language. We don't learn, I mean, I do, but most lawyers don't learn about verb tenses and conditional sentences and clauses and all that other stuff that translators do know. So what you have already as a translator is very valuable. You have that writing experience and you have that writing talent. You probably have a handle on the source language and the target language that's already far superior to the lawyer's handle, right? Because you're a language expert. You have that added value already.
Can I share an example? It was a case about a death. Okay, it was a sad story, but I've been translating for legal firms here in Greece. So I was translating the text, and the reason of the death had I could translate it in 3 different ways in Greek. So the English word could by then be translated in Greek with 3 different ways. And the lawyers didn't know to tell me what was the reason, the reason of the death of the victim in order to translate it. So I had like a meeting with all my legal translators. We decided one term. And then it was proved by the case, how we say that, the word, when they made the research and the police, and they found out that this was the reason of the death, that it wasn't clearly stated in the English text. The English text, the word that they used could be like translated in 3 different ways. We choose by chance okay, because of the context. We followed like what we know, the linguistic process and the translation process. We thought that this was the best way to translate it. And then finally, by the research made by the police and all the court case, the reason finally was proved to be the way that we had translated from the first part. So that it was a case that the lawyers came back and gave us congratulations for your translation, because we somehow had found the way of the death of the victim that it wasn't proved before. So maybe there was like it by chance by then, but still you can help also lawyers. And you can be very helpful to lawyers' work as well. So don't be afraid. As Paula said, it's different to be afraid and being respecting and respect this profession.
Yeah, and if I can add one more thing to this whole question, is you can always reach out to lawyers if you have a question about a particular term. And I mean, it's very, I mean, there are ways of approaching someone, right? But if you're doing it respectfully and you're not overdoing it and you're being and you're really trying not to abuse whatever relationship you have with that person, you can always reach out and just reach out to experts in a particular field and just say, hey, you know what, I'm a translator and I'm struggling with this term. How do you understand this as an expert in this field? And I've done that a lot of times throughout my career. I still do it sometimes. I will reach out to someone who I know. If I'm doing a translation, recently I had to do a translation on a particular situation that happened in Colombia. And I reached out to a lawyer in Colombia and I said, you know what, I'm struggling with this term. What can I read in your jurisdiction? How do you understand this as an expert lawyer? And what bibliography do you recommend? It's like 2 sentences. And they got back to me with all this information. And you can do this too, because you know, where people are usually very open to helping others out when it's a genuine thing that you're just trying to do your job, you're trying to do it well. Who's going to say no? They'll very rarely say no.
And you know, because we are mentioning professors here, our professor's advice by then was like, what is the most powerful tool of a translator? And we were saying like our dictionaries or cat tools or I don't know. And he said, your agenda. Having people in different professions will help you out in such occasions. And because I started out as a technical translator and legal in a big company, I was translating aircraft specifications. Like imagine a starting out translator going out of the university and starting translating aircraft specifications, so technical specifications. That was for me really hard. But what I did by then is going to the military people working in the company and asking them for specific definition of the terms in the Greek language. So I can tell that some of them they didn't know or they couldn't help, but you get a lot of help by realizing that you can help them as well by your linguistic skills.
Yeah,
but most of the times, okay, hello, people are saying hello. Do lawyers who translate make more money because they are lawyers or because they specialize?
I love that question. Who asked that? Whoever asked that question, you're brilliant. You're on the right track already. Okay, my personal view, and of course I can't speak for every lawyer / translator out there. I think that we make more money because we specialize. And this is something that it took me a really long time to wrap my head around this concept. When I was young and I was starting out, people kept saying, market yourself as an expert. And I had no idea what that meant. I mean, I just thought, how do you market yourself as an expert? I mean, it was just something that was fully beyond my comprehension. But I did at some point figure out that meant that when people think of your specialization and your language pair, they have to think of you. And when you're at that level, where somebody's looking at a Spanish English, in my case, Spanish English legal translation, and they think, oh, Paula Arturo, I did my job right, marketing myself. They don't think Paula Arturo because I'm a lawyer, even though being a lawyer is a large part of my marketing strategy, of course. But a larger part of my marketing strategy is showing expertise in what I do and displaying my expertise every chance I get. Which is different from showing off, by the way. just want to make that clear. So you don't want to show off, like you don't want to be that obnoxious person that's like a know-it-all, but you do want to be that person who knows their stuff, who's helpful, and who people will come to when they need an expert in a particular field. And that puts you in a position where people are coming to you. And when you're in a position where people are coming to you, you have what we lawyers refer to as leverage. When you have leverage, you can raise your prices.
And they trust you that way. That's how I see it. They can trust you easier if you have a very specialized profile. And in terms like of how you do it on LinkedIn, for example, your headline, the more specialized it seems, if it has a specialization in it, the easier people to find you if they're looking for a specialized translator in a specific field, if it's to be legal. And the more that you include details about that specialization and more you're niching down, as Paula says today in our topic, I think the more the chances to find the ideal client and the ideal client to find you the other way around. So it's very important. How do you measure your level of expertise?
I don't think you can measure it with any kind of objective criteria. I mean, we can argue about this like for hours, but I'll tell you what translators impressed me. Like the translators that I personally will recommend to other people when somebody asks me, like, do you know a good legal translator for blah? Is the translator who can hold an intelligent, informed conversation with me about the law. Like if you can have a conversation, and I don't mean talk to me like as if you were a lawyer, because that's only something I expect from other lawyers. But if you can have an intelligent, informed conversation with me about the latest Supreme Court ruling, and I hear that you really got it, like you understood what the issue was there, what the court was discussing, why this matters, and you did it with terminology that just like it pinged and it sounded good, then I know that I can trust you to do a translation. I know that if I recommend you, you're that person who knows their stuff. And I'll feel comfortable recommending you to my colleagues. Of course, I have to know you a little bit and also know that you meet your deadlines and all the other stuff. But I mean, just off the bat, I think that is the number one thing that you want to be able to achieve, is that sufficient understanding that makes someone feel like, okay, they understand the subject matter enough to translate. And they're also, another thing that is important to me, I appreciate people who are intellectually honest. So I appreciate people who are not afraid to say, I don't know, but I'll look it up, right? So if I'm having a conversation with you, or if we're in any kind of meeting, the people who I will trust are the people who are brave enough to say, I don't know, let's do some research. Because those are the people who, you know, when they're looking at the source text, they're the ones, if they don't know something and they don't understand it, they're the ones that are going to ask the right questions. They're the ones that are going to do research, excuse me, and they're likely to be the ones that are going to deliver that exceptional translation. Or if they couldn't solve a linguistic problem, they're the ones that are going to flag it for you and say, hey, you know what, I struggled with this. Let's dig a little deeper.
And that applies in any specialization, not only legal. We always appreciate that in our colleagues, to be honest and tell that this is the part that I would really like to have a help, or I have like two different translations for this term. Which one, like, do you think applies to the situation? So it's always, very helpful for us whenever we collaborate with translators. But thank you so much for that. And how do you market yourself as a specialist?
Okay, so that's a complicated question for someone with my background, because I've been at this for so long. And you know, people who started 20 years ago, like I did, the market was very different back then. We didn't have all this internet stuff that you guys have. That's just amazing. And personally, I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of it. For me, it was just, I'm an in-person kind of person. So I built my business around, like I said earlier, just introducing myself, like going after the client that I wanted and finding a way to either introduce myself to that person directly or to get introduced. I would, when I was in law school, I even used some of my professors to introduce me to people who I thought could potentially be clients for me. So I would, and I'm not shy. So I would just, you know, excuse me, excuse me, professor, can you introduce me to, you know, Owen Fitz over there? I'd really like to meet him. And we'd go and I would introduce myself to that person. But that was 20 years ago. So it was different back then. I think today, if you are starting out, you probably have an additional challenge, which is that the market is just so much more crowded than it was 20 years ago. Okay. There's so many people out there competing for services. And you also, I think today, probably have to really be good at selling your online image as well. But I think you can also market yourself as an expert and really use the internet to do that. Showcase your work, showcase your knowledge, because really we are probably, I would say, one of the most intellectual professions out there. So really showcasing that intellectual capacity that translators have is what sets us apart.
That's very clever, but I can tell that building relationships, what you did, that's what you did. You built relationship back then. It's something that really has results nowadays. So I don't see it something like it's out of the time, like it's something that did happen before the online connection or all these online relationships nowadays. I think that even nowadays, even if we have so many different media to promote ourselves, building real relationships and meeting people in person before coronavirus in events, I think for me worked the best in order and had the best results in terms of getting clients and maybe expanding my network, because people, they see you, they can build a relationship, as we say, they see the chemistry they have, so they can trust you even better rather than seeing an online profile on LinkedIn, for example, or maybe a presentation online. It's still, I think it's a step ahead, building real relationships in person. And the second thing that I would like to add here is, like, you had the mindset, even if you do not like the word, to go after your clients and build those relationships. So I believe that if you were starting out now, today, with the same situation, like you said, we are crowded, with the competition is like higher today, I believe that you would do the same. You would do differently, maybe different way, but you would go after your dreams and your goals, and you would have the same results. I'm pretty sure for that, because you knew how to do it and you knew what you wanted to do and you were going after that. So for me, and the advice that I give, we shouldn't measure the competition. We shouldn't have in mind, oh, now it's more difficult to get work. There is a lot of competition, so I have to like lower my rates in order to find clients. No, you should have the mindset that Paula just described, how she did it, even if it's today, and just apply the methods that we have today, which is online. Okay, we have LinkedIn, connecting people online, having live events, for example, online, meeting people online, creating an online network with so many social media accounts, but still building connection and still going after. But I totally agree, Paula, you would do the same. You would have the same success if you just started out today. You should apply maybe a different strategy.
I would definitely have to. I think I would change my strategy just a tiny little bit if I had to start out today. Just adapt it to the just how things are today. But I also think that there's an advantage to today's world that we didn't have back in my day, which is that in my day, I should mention, I've been living in Argentina for a very long time. Argentina is a developing country. So in my day, there was this sort of gap between translators in the developed world who had direct access to these clients that we all coveted, and those of us who lived in the developing world and could not access those clients directly. So a large part of my work was waiting for those people to come to me when they were in Argentina or anywhere in Latin America that I could afford to travel to go and meet them in person, and then getting and meeting those people. Today, I think you have other ways of accessing those clients and that's something that I think is an advantage in today's world, and it's more the norm now. So you have a lot more people are used to doing business with people that they've never met in person, and even the legal community is a lot more open to hiring people, just looking at an internet profile, and of course they're going to dig. They're going to do some digging. They're going to look you up. They're going to make sure that you're legit because they're lawyers. But you know, once you find that this person's business is legit, then you're more likely to want to work with them, even if you've never met them in person. In my day, that was very different. The legal community was much more closed than it is today. And so I think that's an advantage for those of you who are younger and want to get out there and go after these clients. You've got the internet that just puts the entire world at your fingertips. And it's also a great thing for people who are a little bit more shy about in-person, face-to-face kind of meetings, right? Because I'm kind of extroverted, which makes it easier for me to just tap on someone's shoulder and say, hey, can you introduce me? Some people are a little bit more shy about that. And for those of you who are shyer, you've got the internet that sort of helps protect you a little bit from that. You can still put yourself out there, but at a safer distance in a way that maybe is more comfortable for you.
Thank you so much for mentioning all this. Is very helpful. I wish that you starting out translators listen to this recording at least later, if not now, because it's very helpful what Paula just said. And just one last question. We are almost 1 hour live. How does specialist pricing differ from non-specialist pricing? And in general, how does the specialist market differ from other markets?
Okay, so the specialized, I would say the more specialized you are and the more coveted you are in your market segment, the higher your fees are going to be within reason, right? So there's no such thing as one single cross market price that applies to everything all the time, right? A lot of times we talk about pricing and we look at it like there's a standard rate for my language pairs. There's no such thing as a standard rate because markets are segmented and different segments have different needs and they have different budgets. So what specialist niche marketing does is that it allows you to place yourself in the market segments that you want to work in. And of course, you're going to have to be in line with that market segment. But when you do niche marketing, you can also do added value pricing. And when you do added value pricing, what you're doing is you're using price as a marketing strategy. You are more expensive than your competitor within reason because you're selling specialized knowledge. So that's reflected in your price. And again, you don't have to be a lawyer to achieve that. You do have to be specialized and find what it is that makes you unique and coveted in that market segment so that you can add that and use that as part of your sales strategy as well.
We see a comment here. It's also a matter of personal characteristics. For some people, it's easier to go after what they want. They are not afraid of putting themselves out there. However, that doesn't mean other people can't. They just need to figure out how to do it in a way that works for them. Great point. Of course. Not all the ways work for everyone. But from my experience, building relationships, the way that Paula described and the way that she did it still works nowadays. And for me and for my business, being 13 years in the business, I can tell from my experience that it was the most effective way of getting clients and expanding my network, being in real live events, present, and building real relationships with people. Not just networking, giving cards, building relationships. That's very important. The difference between these two is very important. So thank you so much, Paula. That was so interesting. We could talk for hours on that, but I really like to watch people your live today and make notes out of this and work towards their goals, even if it's mindset, even if to take courses about legal translation, even if to study law, I don't know, whatever applies to anyone's situation is different. So to recap, we talked about what's the difference of being a lawyer and a legal translator, and the prices and how to market yourself as a specialist. So you can find all this information watching the recording today with Paula Arturo. And we are going to share the link to Paula Arturo Translating Lawyers Academy underneath the video for those that might be interested, and you can contact Paula directly through this link. Is there anything, any course coming up you would like to share with
so my next course is sold out. You can't sign up, but I do have a couple of courses coming out. There's a contract translation course coming in July. I've got an introduction to legal translation that is also starting soon. So yeah, I've always got courses sort of coming and going, and they're all on my webpage, so you can check that out.
Okay, so you can find all the information on the webpage. For curiosity reasons, they are sold out because you take specific seats, specific people, number of people in your courses?
No, not normally. This one in particular is a course that I'm teaching through Training for Translators, which is Corinne Mackay's institute, and she has a limited, In my usual courses, they're unlimited because I just use a platform that lets me just, it's different. I'm not going to go into it.
Yes, I really would like to know that this was a particular case, so please do not get afraid. Find the courses on Paula's website, Translating Lawyers Academy, we're going to set. And also you said a monthly webinar for free.
I give out a free monthly webinar. You can, I usually post about it on my Instagram, which is Instagram/Translating Lawyers. I hang it up on my YouTube channel, which is you'll also find under Translating Lawyers. And I always announce it. I've got a Facebook group called Legal Writing and Translation. For those of you who are interested, I share quick tips, grammar tips, and vocabulary, what words mean and how to translate certain terms. So all that. And that's also where I share my course information.
Okay, thank you so much. So you'll find this information in this group as well. I'm a member there and I watch this, so that's very interesting. One last question. Hello, hello. Any idea if networking results are different countries? Wondering if Greek and Spanish-speaking countries, both of which I work with, still value face-to-face more than English-speaking or other European countries? Well, we cannot answer that because both of us.
Networking results are different in different countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think people are people, and lawyers are lawyers. There is a there is a culture among lawyers that we share no matter what country we're from. Lawyers are trained to be very formal, to be very objective, to be very, I don't want to say cold, but we are trained to keep a certain distance. So I think it's more about understanding your target client's professional culture. And when you can understand the professional culture, which is a shared culture, because they really drill it into us in law school, because it has to do with the values that are what we call the values of the law. If you can tap into that, chances are you can figure out how to approach your clients in a way that is comfortable for you, but that also works within this broader legal culture.
Yeah, that's very nice and very clever approach. So we should know that as well. Marianne asks if it's better to be a lawyer linguist or vice versa. So you will find we discussed 1 hour about this topic, so you can find in detail the answer of Paula and Paula's opinion on that. So please watch the recording. Thank you all of you for being here. I'm taking like the chance of the last minute to say about the masterclass that I said yesterday, because I had 500 people registered already. So I will feel very proud of that. And I had 300 people attending live from all over the world, like Miami, Brazil, Argentina, Cameroon in Africa, Australia. So I was so happy yesterday, and people are sending me so nice words. So thank you all of you that you did attend. I see some people here yesterday masterclass. It was 90 minutes going into deep about client acquisition strategies. And I just launched the program that I had in mind so long ago, but I came the inspiration. I would really love your opinion on that, Paula, during the lockdown, because I had every day like 3 or 4 sessions with mentees from all over the world coming to me. I don't have work. During the lockdown, people do not send me, clients do not send me work, or the company I used to work closed down, or they fired me, or for example, for interpreters, these things were even harder. They didn't have any work at all. So from all this, doing every day 3 and 4 sessions with mentees from all over the world, I found out the idea to create a program that might work like as a group program and also brainstorm together with other like-minded colleagues. So you can find also the details below the link, the video. I'm going to share the link as well. And it's my baby. I really love it. I did it with all of my heart to provide back to the community as well. It has a fee. It's the first program that I created with a fee. I always just did giving back to the community. But I believe, like you might agree, Paula, that if you invest for something that you really want, as your courses or whatever, like we do, we are more focused and we see better results in all of our efforts rather than registering for a free event and never attend it, for example. That's the most common reaction when something is free. We do not put all of our efforts in order to see the results that we want.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like, so I run one thing that I love to do. And, you know, there's a difference between my free app that just tracks my stuff, and I don't expect much more from my free app other than just tracking my progress, and my paid app. I know it's a silly comparison, but the thing is my expectations are different, because I can't abuse the app maker either. I want the app maker to be able to give me their all, and the app maker needs to pay their bills too, right? So there's that one thing, but there's also the fact that when you pay for something, you really do put a lot into it. I mean, I put a lot of money into my own education to be able to achieve a certain goal. Had law school been free, I don't know if things would have been different. Would I have been more driven or less driven? I don't know. Well, maybe law school is not a good example, but you know what I mean. It's just that you do invest more, and you do deserve to invest in yourself and invest in good quality training. It's just with every profession, you're going to need to do that. You need to learn things. You need to learn them from people who have to provide you that service. They can provide you that service, but it's an investment in yourself. I don't think of it as, I think of it as money well spent, is what I'm trying to say.
And you see the investment in the future. I totally see that on my part. So thank you for the nice comments here. They say that it was a great masterclass. I get so good feedback. So thank you so much for your kind words. And you will see more details. 10 more spots, because already, imagine from 300 people how many calls and emails I got for this program. So take a quick action. And thank you so much, Paula, for being here. It was so interesting, the discussion.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you to the person who said I rock? I can't see the name here, but thank you. That's like my favorite thing.
Yeah, we cannot see your name because you have to click the link above in order to see your name here. But in any case, Paula is a member of the mentoring community. So I think, Paula, you will follow up later with the comments and the questions you have. So comment below this video so as Paula to see them and come back to you in the Mentoring for Translators group. And it was another Ask Your Mentor Anything session, weekly session, and with Paula Arturo from Argentina, Translating Lawyers Academy. And we're going to share the information later in the group in the comment section. So once again, thank you all of you for being here. The recording is going to stay in the Mentoring for Translators group and on YouTube channel, so you can watch it everywhere. And once again, thank you so much, Paula. I wish to meet you in person someday after the coronavirus.
Absolutely.
And wish you success to all these things that you are doing. And see you later in the group, all of you. Thank you, Paula. Bye to all of you.
Thank you, guys. Oh, Carol.